Welcome to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. The Vancouver Writers Fest connects people to exceptional books, ideas, and dialogue through year-round programming that ignites a passion for words and the world around us. We carry out our work on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. We're delighted to share this conversation with two Canadian literary stars. Canisia Lubrin's debut fiction, Noir, was named a Best Book of 2024 by CBC and the Globe and Mail. Its 59 linked stories range in style from contemporary realism to dystopia, to futuristic fantasy to historical fiction. She speaks about the book with award-winning author Dionne Brand, whose latest work is Salvage, Readings from the Wreck. This event was presented on October 24th, 2024, as part of our annual festival in Vancouver. It was organized in collaboration with the Canada Council for the Arts to celebrate the finalists and winners of the Governor-General's Literary Awards, and presented in partnership with Hogan's Alley Society. We'd also like to thank our public sector funders, the Government of Canada, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Government of BC, the BC Arts Council, the City of Vancouver, and CMHC Granville Island.
Thank you. How are you doing? Okay. There you go. So, I'm Dionne Brand, and I'm your event moderator, they tell me. And so, welcome to Canisia Lubrin in Conversation. This event is organized in collaboration with the Canada Council for the Arts to celebrate the finalists and winners of the Governor-General's Literary Awards. And as you know, Canisia's book has been shortlisted for the Governor-General's Award. And the event is also presented in partnership with Hogan's Alley Society. We're pleased, very pleased that you have all joined us this evening. Sounds like a nice warm crowd. Thank you very much for that lovely welcome. And now please allow me to introduce Canisia Lubrin. Canisia is a poet and writer. Her poetry books include Voodoo Hypothesis and The Dysgraphist. These works have been recognized by the Griffin Poetry Prize, the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, and the Derek Walcott Prize, all of which she won. They were finalists for the Trillium Award for Poetry and the Gigi Award for Poetry in previous years. This year, she's a finalist for the Atwood Gibson Writers' Trust Fiction Prize and the Governor-General's Literary Award for Fiction for the book Noir, Metamorphoses. She is the coordinator of the University of Guelph's MFA in Creative Writing and poetry editor at McClelland and Stewart. So she is really busy. I have no idea. You know, she's like Durga or something with 12 hands. You know? A little known fact and a well-kept secret is, and I'm reluctant to share this with you, however, I will, is that she is a gourmet chef. Right? Okay? And I have had the beneficence of her duck confit. It's serious. I have been deconstructed by her curried snow crab and disarticulated by her grilled langostino, okay? I say this only as a point of information so you may know what you are in for with this work. It's beneficence, it's deconstructions, and its disarticulations. Code Noir Metamorphoses is a rich, expansive, formally inventive work of fiction, deeply intertextual. It teaches the reader how to read it through its intimacy and intelligence. Here are stories that take you into their confidences. Confidences that are knowing, but at the same time, defamiliarizing. You meet these speakers wherever they are in their lives and perhaps wherever you are in yours. And they know things they shouldn't know, and uncannily, they know things that you know. Things about lullabies and dogs. Some of these stories are like looking through blue sea glass. Some are like drinking strong liquor. These stories are magic, and you must enter them as if you too are wondrous. Please let us welcome on stage Canisia Lubrin.
Well, I have some gourmet tea here. In a different time, I would pass it around and make sure you all have some, but these are not the times we live in. Thank you so much, Dionne Brand, for everything, and especially for this much too revealing introduction. It's a real pleasure, an honor, and a particular beauty to be here and to be able to have this time to speak with Dionne, who who is one of the main writers who opened a path ahead of me, and shone an extraordinary light that I could see far, far ahead, and go with a lot of patience where a lot of unclarity existed. So thank you very much, and thank you to Leslie Hertig and everyone at the Writers' Fest, all the volunteers, everybody who keeps this boat rocking steady, and all of you. Thank you for coming. It's a beautiful thing that you have come. I will begin by reading from the book just a short passage. It is bookended by opening remarks and closing remarks. So I will read the opening remarks and a very short excerpt of one of the stories. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I just want to acknowledge that. Super nice. Opening remarks. The murderers in this draft are those who write the laws, who tell you to prepare for the tragedy of the afternoon because they have claimed with their black codes every morning of every country on earth. They won't tell you that it is their minister, their president, their physician, or their deacon swept up in another breaking, buried language. All those who will be ridiculed by mid-morning. The murderers must admit you are growing into their fictions, that it is your hello that begins the conjuring. There is only one word for this fiction in the English language: belief, and two in the French: croyance et loi. Okay, there's also la foi, but who's counting? In 5 minutes, a strange order of time that does not involve experience or awareness, only innocence, will arrive, and you must be prepared. On another bridge, with a lit match, there's a poet asking, what does it mean to speak as though the world you know is the world? I do not require your belief. If you are here, you know by now that the bankers are useless, though dangerous. The kings are flies. The craven philosophers with some of their poet friends have left for the mountains. And the rest of us, we are somewhat bored with it, all of it, and somewhat overcome. So keep pace with what is about to happen in these pages. If anybody gets to preaching, you point them to the footnotes. If anybody tells you they have the only truth, you use your nose instead. If anybody claims innocence, stop them. If anybody tells you everything is working fine, run, or do whatever you want. It may be that the world is always tuned to our senses, and we attach ourselves against our best wisdom to everything above the surface of the earth. This whole thing, it is all a setup, as likely as homecoming is to the homeless. What else is law? What happens in these pages is a setup in the same way that the cosmos does not select its own plot, its own afterlives of universes and planets. In the same way that the gods are as small as the people who invent them. I sometimes went flying with a winged assassin. We flew across the continents, met gods with wrecked noses and infant deities with erections, all framed in the rooms of men at arms. And we sometimes named the things against which we thrash out our living. Now, in our boiling world, the perspective of the drone assassin forms part of the shifting earth of this writing. What other way to live on this side of the history you will encounter here? When that king and the ones before and after him wrote his codes, he could not fathom how the mountains would be filled with cowardly philosophers. I am not the first to tell you this, but I must say it here. This is the world. This is the world you don't know. You know. This story is called Earth in the Time of Billie Holiday, and it is preceded by Article 6 of King Louis XIV's Code Noir. Article 6. Let us enjoin all our subjects, of whatever quality and condition they may be, to observe the days of Sundays and the feast days, which are kept by our subjects of the Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman religion. Let us forbid them to work, nor to make their slaves work on said days, from the hour of midnight until the other midnight, on the cultivation of the earth, the manufacture of sugars and all other works, on pain or fine and arbitrary punishment against the masters and confiscation of both sugar and slaves, who will be surprised by our officers at work. Earth in the Time of Billie Holiday. February 24, 1942, was our last day in the City of Angels. Combat was nothing like what they promised. It commanded no serious loyalty from me or CM, though it did have a first taste, a sound, the rapid sounds of an illusion coming apart. CM did not pay my gripes about war much mind, but he could not appreciate why my hand shook on that trigger. But he still agreed that we should run off, far away from here, and risk the dishonor that made no fuss about us anyway. Because some people got to be a nasty kind of clean. They could play the pastimes of country and new lives, any of them as they pleased, while others of us got to kill or be killed for it. Plus, this rule-breaking involved both CM and me, so it would be a thrill to have a dirty joy in the core of other disturbances. The road beneath our convoy made a game of lurching, like a pre-warning, fading only to start up again, over and over. But nothing could be avoided when the air raid sirens began, breaking out across the city as abruptly as anything the governments were doing. We could still speak at our normal pitch and volume because we were so used to a different kind of loud, one we could not compete with. General Mitch, the new officer, was making a clamor of his orders, and the rest of us made a half attempt to pay attention. Then we saw it, the flash, a sharp light appearing, then gone, the cloud darkening in a sky of bright white and blue. "The Japs are here," someone said. "I don't have no reason to die like this," CM told me. I noticed the oiliness of his face, how it threatened to collect all the horror in him, set us all ablaze. And I would have no objections, the last of anything cheery in me now gone. "The poorer you are, the richer to die, brother," I said to CM. And look at us. Don't we be known death before now? It got some deep gashes, some big yawns, lively for any one of us. It will be a small blessing after this. I'll stop here.
So Code Noir takes its title from the infamous Code Noir, the black codes of Louis XIV of France, who in 1685 promulgated the code, that served for the execution and conduct of slavery in the French colonies. It set out rules of punishment. It meted out restrictions of movement and action. It set out forced conversions to Catholicism. It ordered to the minute detail the violence of the condition of slavery in 59 codes. Tell just how you came to the idea of this work. If taking that Code Noir and making these, well, they aren't 60, there are 59 stories and opening remarks and closing remarks. So talk a little bit about the genesis of the project, how you thought, okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Right. So I think like all other works that that seem to spring forth from, a kind of mystery, this one, it just occurred to me one day. I had been doing a little bit of research for when I was writing The Dysgraphist, my second book, and I came upon the Black Codes. I had made a very specific query, and this was at the height of the really bad phase of the pandemic. So I couldn't go outside to research or anything like that, so no libraries and such. So I was just using good old Google. And up came the Black Codes. And the first instinct I had was, okay, what is this very small bell that is going off in the recesses of my mind? And as I'm reading through the codes, which were in French, I was surprised, a kind of shock, actually, that I didn't immediately recognize them, right? So I had obviously some very kind of cursory or really covered up awareness of them. And I thought, man, this document, which is it's a founding document of the modern world, why isn't it everywhere? Why isn't it, part of, a kind of foundational set of conversations, that, and for instance, something like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that, that kind of engagement with our history. So what I ended up using in The Dysgraphist was almost nothing. It was very, very little. And I thought, I have to come back to you with fiction to put what immediately occurred to me was to put the fictions, the very false logics of these codes next to other fictions, which are my fictions that I would write, but have them be a lot more interested, not in trying to disprove the king's codes or those articles, but to simply be demonstrative of the excesses of our lives that just by force of juxtaposition already produces counter-narrative, right? So I thought, okay, when I'm done with The Dysgraphist, I'm coming back to you for fiction.
So what was the first one you wrote?
Well,
I know you didn't write them in order.
I did not write them in order. The first one I wrote in 2008, and it was Hula Hoop Prophet, which was for a creative writing assignment, an intro to creative writing class. Right. And it's pretty well intact. There's not much that changed in it. Because when sitting in front of the daunting task of having to write 59 stories, I was like, I better see what the hell I have absolutely anywhere. Because, I went back to, I thought, okay, I'm just going to write 11 stories and be done with it. And so I did that. And then I thought, okay, so maybe I could do a few more. I'll do 18. And I know you like to deny this. But then I was speaking to you. And you said, there's only one answer. Why don't you just do all 59? Like, what's wrong?
I do not remember this conversation. I don't.
I know. But that is
And
the
anyway,
truth.
it was probably just a throwaway thing. Well,
It
why did
was.
you 59?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But then when you say a thing, you just have to listen when Dionne Brand says a thing. Right? So I was running away for months. And as soon as she said the throwaway thing, I was like, what do you mean? Just all 59, obviously. I was like, you're right. And I'll be here forever.
I just don't like That's the part that worries me. I think, oh my God. Okay. So, on the one hand, the stories supersede the codes, right? They don't elaborate the codes. So you don't do a kind of one-on-one, kind of linear, response to the code, particularly, right, at all, actually. So they don't elaborate the codes either in linearity or in shape. I mean, the stories are sometimes allegory, they're sometimes speculative, they're sometimes realist, they're sometimes epistolary, they're like sometimes a sentence, there's sometimes a paragraph, and so on. Can you say why one story form follows a particular code? Was that, designed, or how did you come to that? And can you talk about, talk about that.
Yeah. It's a very good question.
Talk about the decisions you
Yes.
were making as you went along.
As I was coming through the book, yes.
Yeah.
I think, facing the codes, the King's codes, turned out to be quite difficult. It taught me something about myself, because I tend to be quite fastidious. If I'm doing something, I just go through. I just go straight through, and I get it done. But when I got the bulk of the writing done, I started to feel, a huge amount of emotional, psychological, and spiritual depletion. And it was just, writing the stories was one thing, but having to sit in the presence of the codes themselves and the kind of impossible vileness in them, I knew that I did not want to write necessarily representative stories in relation to the codes, because that can only lead to one kind of necrotic realism, right? Which is, every story will have a bunch of slaves in it, or maybe just one slave, and, have untold numbers of horrific things visited upon them, because that is the logic of narrative. If you set a thing up, you have to answer it somehow. But I thought, even in that, it surprised me how much, how negatively it affected me, just on a psychic level. And so I think I was like, I emerged from my office maybe like 2 weeks later thinking, have I been in here for 2 weeks straight? And I really couldn't say. Like, that something happened to completely dull my sense of time. And that to me was instructive. So in crafting the stories, that whole experience opened up a kind of approach that became omnidirectional. I could move far, far into the future. And what would a story in like the year 4042 look like? If in fact the protagonist, the narrator of that story, is actually reporting on their physiology and saying, I'm made of vapor and water and and metal. How does that actually affect the materialist story? And so in that particular story, the 59th one that happens far, far in the future, the way that I set up dialogue, the tags in the dialogue, even that to me, it occurred to me that had to be different. That speech, or what we understand now as speech, had to be different somehow. So there was, I'm setting up the dialogue as language being a thing of taste, and touch leading to a kind of translation where, there's a complete block in communication, and things like that. So the codes, some of the codes that I found to be utterly ridiculous in their redundancy, which is about belief and the condition of the slave and such like that, I thought like an epistolary form would be a good thing to contrast that kind of single damning vision of like who a person is, and just to allow the form of the letter to do the work of intimacy, to have one person address another, and to have that be just someone going about their interests and their lives and the kind of messy and complex and beautiful work of addressing someone who is your intimate, because there's a set of letters exchanged between sisters, and each of them are separate stories, but they're talking to each other. And I thought that more powerful than, for instance, writing a kind of third person, or one-to-one kind of thing. Yeah. And then, of course, there are certain realisms that I think are just much too limiting. So a kind of absurdity was a way to move away from the representational, like Black Rhino, right? Just to have a really absurd story about, a woman giving birth to her son, naming him Black Rhino before she passes. But because she was an artist and you did this mural at, a kind of orphanage, which is where he ended up, he amasses language so quickly that they start to call him Black Rhino, and he just can't stop talking until one day he just leaps into the mural and stays there like a spider, right? So that kind of absurdity, it proves another way of assessing, the evidence of a life, right? And it didn't have to stay in the limiting corridor of realism, for instance.
Right, and also realism of a particular kind.
Yeah.
Like a realism that runs along the sort of economic regime of that very code, in a way.
Precisely.
So, yeah.
And I think we have a lot of those stories already.
Yeah.
And I find them less and less interesting.
Yeah. So the subtitle of the book is Metamorphoses, and you have 4 stories called Metamorphosis 1, Metamorphosis 2, Metamorphosis 3, and Metamorphosis 4 within the thing, within the book. What was your thinking there? And in some ways I was thinking, all of these stories a kind of metamorphosis, where a violent event transforms the protagonist. And as you described that, the writing and the effects of the codes on you, it's almost as if the code went through you and then a story came out that exceeded the code or something, right?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yes. Actually, I had every single story was called a metamorphosis at one point.
I see. So the editor must have said, what?
No, that version did not make it to the editor.
Okay.
Because I thought, all right, this shouldn't happen. Probably too many. I just thought it was too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Where I prefer subtlety. Yes. So the articles of the King's Codes, I translated them from the French, and that gave me another kind of violent intimacy with them. And I had a friend of mine help me the second half of the way, Thea Matonji, who a lovely writer. And so we translated the codes, and them coming into English gave me a certain clarity. And I'm thinking, what this thing about the slave must carry the branding of the master and then the markings of the master, and if they are a place they shouldn't be, the white members of the community are basically deputized to take them and arrest them, basically place them under citizen's arrest and store them in a hospital until a master comes. And, so I'm looking at these codes and I'm like, this stuff still happens. This thing is carding.
Many are deputized.
Yes,
to regulate
and
blackness in a way, right?
there are certain people deputized against the presence of the quote unquote other black people, indigenous people, etc. And the ways in which they conscript spirituality into this religious framing that keeps everything very narrow. And you can only be a Roman Catholic, and they actually begin the code. The very first article begins by asking for the banishment of all Jewish people from the colonies, and then therefore the rest, meaning the slaves, are to be conscripted only in this regimented, mechanical way of just producing. And making work happen to fill the coffers of the super rich. So it just occurred to me that these ideas, the logic of the codes and their jurisprudence are very much still present in current day jurisprudence. And, this idea of reform as progress, which is why I put the Aimé Césaire epigraph in the beginning. That is the thing I kind of wanted to gesture to without, making any particular or systematic structural decisions about it. And so that's why I used the subtitle Metamorphoses. And that was primarily it. But certainly there are echoes in classical literature and other, with Kafka and Ovid and those folks. But it was really that. It was just looking at the codes and seeing how they have just been given these makeovers and now are applied not just to Black people. And so we are people of the Black codes. I like to use the example of even the passport and the emergence of the nation state. The fact that you need to carry your ID card when you go there or there. They've been put to different kinds of use, but the logic of them are seated, in a document like the Code Noir.
I was also thinking of Amos Tutuola, My
Life in the Bush of
Forests. But I was thinking about how the imaginations of the enslaved peoples are not are never taken, are never articulated. That imagination beyond the code, but only the bodies and lives are reconciled to the code, and that somehow you were pointing to this excess, this imaginative life of enslaved people, which kind of exceeds all attempts to reconcile them with those codes or to reconcile them with a kind of unhumanity in a way. And I thought that was what those are evident, that imaginative life that is evidenced in the stories,
Yeah. Yes. I like to think it's obvious, but perhaps it's good to kind of put it in the air. It's impossible to have a generous imagination about people or beings or places or species that you imagine beneath you or you imagine vacant of any livingness. It's impossible to extend a generous imagination in their direction. And so, of course, none of the peoples of the king's court could imagine any of us. And certainly, the characters in the book exist in that kind of really full and brilliant and often quite mysterious, imaginative leaps. I'm gathering a different kind of evidence, and it's deeply speculative. And I think I privileged the. So I mean, writing is just making a bunch of decisions, right? So you're constantly making decisions about, you're making choices about what to put where and what to not put there, and I think I privileged what was more mysterious, because in a sense it freed me from having to justify and explain and use, you know, the kind of cause and effect narrative technique that we learned from the 19th century novel, and which, you know, can reproduce a lot of the logics that are actually in the codes. And I just didn't want to give that kind of material too much presence in the book. If they're there, they're passing, or there's a glance at them, or some other thing. But it is in the places of our lives that kind of stop us in our track and make us go, huh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and how to make story from that material.
Yeah. So in Metamorphosis 1, a letter arrives to someone, or a report arrives. Speak of this, please. In the story, the speaker says, "Even so, I have finally solved loneliness. Loneliness is nostalgia. If you never let anyone enter your door, if you never let anyone enter your door, it won't ever speak to you of loss." What is that?
So
that's a very interesting, you know.
I know. I'm still asking that question myself. It's like, I don't know what this is.
I have finally solved loneliness.
I have solved loneliness. So I don't know that.
And it says loneliness is nostalgia.
Loneliness is nostalgia. Yes, since I put there were two levels of things going on there. Since I put the philosophers in the opening remarks, I feel I had to have them appear very explicitly in at least one of the stories. So the narrator of this story is a kind of philosopher poet, who and the code that is juxtaposed with this story is the first one, in which, you know, they kind of order the banishment of Jewish people from the French colonies, and then set the terms by which slavery would be practiced inside its legal framework, which didn't exist before, right? The people were participating in this thing, but there wasn't a legal mechanism for it. So this narrator obviously has left someone behind, for whom they feel, you know, a kind of emotional responsibility for a kind of breakup, but we don't really see it that, you know, in that sense. So it's not one that's decided on. It's one that's forced. It's a kind of forced exile. And so they enter deeply and wound, you know, they're wounded by, you know, inside this this investigation of what loneliness could possibly be, and to give that kind of opportunity for someone who probably was just formally enslaved, and to have them think in these ways, and to give them a life of deep thought. You know, that was what was interesting to me. But then suddenly I started to go down this rabbit hole of what what loneliness is, and the kind of sense of, you know, how we are implicated in each other's lives in the world, and why loneliness seems to be a kind of special emotional state, that even in company of others, you can feel deeply lonely. And that kind of contradiction, I wanted that to be kind of present for this narrator, who is now exiled and moving through the islands, you know, still thinking and writing this letter as they move through the islands, and a kind of nostalgia, you know, about oh, this is what I have lost, this is what I've left behind. But if I never had it, then I don't have an opportunity to lose it or miss it or to be lonely because, it once existed. It has left an imprint somehow. And, so it was the interesting exercise was just the thought exercise itself. And that's where it took me.
So you say. Okay. So you have three stories that begin Earth in the time of, and you read part of Earth in the time of Billie Holiday, Earth in the time of the artist, Earth in the time of Aimé Césaire. First, tell us about the use of this apostrophe, this resonance, Earth in the time of. Yeah. I particularly like Earth. I particularly like everything, okay? But because I'm struck by, because you're a poet, then language is so, every kind of sentence you write is resonant with stuff. So that's why I come upon the thing about loneliness. And then this, Earth in the Time of Aimé Césaire, is a really short story. And it goes like this. On the day we came back from the end of the world, we found a note under your bed. One must begin somewhere. And that's the story. Right? It's lovely, right? Because it has everything in it. On the day we came back, so someone has been somewhere, from the end of the world. Oh my God, right? You just want to fall into that phrase. So something has happened, something apocalyptic. We found a note. We found a note under your bed. And it said, one must begin somewhere. And that's a quote from Césaire. But I've fallen into that story now. But that's not the question I was really asking you. Let's back up the question, like, about this thing that you made these three stories that begin this way. Earth in the time of. Earth in the time of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's you who writes about, Black people being the thought and not the unthought. That's you, right? I'm not.
Maybe.
It
might be you.
No, it's not. It's not me. Yeah, well, that's the presence of Black people in the modern world. If we listen to the colonizers' version of the world, that's that narrative. The only sense of that world we come away with is one of absolute, victimization and subjugation and abjection and all of the terrible things. But in the midst of all that, and again, because of the excesses of our lives that, that allow us in the first place to survive that, they're Black artists and thinkers and revolutionaries and such. They've contributed a lot to the world and how we experience and understand that world. So Billie Holiday, for instance, is a major figure and sound and presence, who is constantly relegated to this strange supporting role in the history of jazz, in a way that she was actually a progenitor of a lot of things, and influenced not just jazz, but blues and R&B and many other forms of culture making. And so,
but her presence is kind of reduced to
that
sad woman,
a sad
as opposed
woman,
to this massive sound,
a broken woman, someone who fell, beneath the kind of that deeply propagandized version of Billie Holiday that we get in popular culture, the drug addict and the thing. So, but Billie, it's undeniable the kind of effect that she has had and continues to have on modern music, And so that became my construction for those stories, is to think, instead of a kind of afterthought, to think in terms of a kind of central role that these documentary characters, and I say documentary because they're real life people, but I fictionalize them in these stories, and to go with a kind of speculation, and to say like there are periods of time that I, on this side of the history, can think of as belonging to
Right.
Billie Holiday or Aimé Césaire or etc. And I was gonna do a lot more of those stories, but I thought I would just keep the artist as a stand-in for the
Well,
for
you
the
could
multiple.
You could do 59 of those.
I
too.
could do 59 of those, you see? And then tomorrow when I bring it up, she'll say, I don't know, I never said that.
No, I love the idea of a period of time marked by Billie Holiday, right? So that's the age of that.
Yeah. And it's also because, I don't know, I think almost everybody can say, I was going through this really tough time, and, it was a Billie Holiday song that did it. It was it was an Aimé Césaire line that did it for me, that sort of broke the mold of impossibility, and instead created a kind of speculative possibility for something, as a way of kind of recharging you for a moment. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. That's wondrous.
Yeah. I can't listen to Billie Holiday on a Sunday.
On a Sunday?
Yeah, I don't know why. Everybody's going, Is that true? Is that true for most of you?
But it's also funny that the code that precedes that poem talks about what slaves should be doing on a Sunday.
Whoa. Okay.
So perhaps it really is Earth in the time of Billie Holiday. I don't know.
It is always. You have several stories in the future.
Yeah.
Right? The very last story 59, is set in a future, or the future. It begins in 3042 and it ends in 4054. Or there's a period marked in it of 4054. And the main character, you were talking about it a little bit earlier, but I thought you might elaborate. And the main character exists in a place where it seems only the senses are used to communicate or to feel or to be.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So tell us about that one. Tell us about that story.
Okay, so again, when I put in the opening remarks, it may be that the whole world is tuned to our senses, and we attach ourselves to everything above the surface of the earth. I thought I would answer that somehow in the final story. And what does that mean to live in a place where the way that your body encounters the world around you would reorient you to another kind of relation, one that is not one that is absolutely counter to that colonial ideology of endless, ceaseless extraction, and everything could be put to that use of endless, ceaseless extraction, and somehow for that to not have any dire consequences. That seems to be the kind of blind lust for just an endless accumulation of wealth. And what if instead the way we experience the world was entirely different, because our senses are so implicated in it that we have to take care of it, and that we have to somehow, like, damage to the world itself would be utter damage to us, but in a really immediate way, not in the kind of elongated way that we have happening, where we had bells going off about climate change decades ago, that now we are seeing the effects of the wildfires and the floods and the absolutely massive hurricanes and the threat of the Atlantic current failing in 5 or 10 years. So that on the one level, there was that, right? But also just to imagine the human body as now in a different phase of evolution, because now you have, you're not, there are two instances where in one of the stories in that third part 3, and elsewhere, there are people who are born inside a cave in the ocean, and are born with an exoskeleton. And that is a particular kind of armor. But that is a kind of foreshadowing for the being that appears in that final story, who is completely permeable, right? Who is made of vapor and water and something that looks kind of like iron, until they have to go through a kind of semi-permeable barrier between a recognizable earth like the one we have, and a stranger one, a much stranger one where you can see, major events in history playing out. So at that remove, I just wanted to imagine what a different orientation to the earth as an organism would produce, in story time. And that necessarily took me beyond planet Earth, because there is a kind of journey that's happening with a Hudson Bay being the epicenter, and then like a journey across from the living world to an unliving world. And so there is this constant exchange. And if the senses became the thing that was an immediate consequence of our encounters, such that we're so deeply implicated in each other's being that harm that is done on one side is immediately felt on the other. But it's the same thing. The people who practiced that extreme form of colonialism or any kind of violence are also themselves marked by that deep violence. And it produces all of these various kinds of effects that to me, I don't understand the deep dissociation that is. I really don't. So that story was a kind of attempt to understand it.
No, it's a lovely story. I mean, it does place you in that world of other meaning, right? Someone says something and someone tastes it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. Yeah. It's a very beautiful story. Get this book. I mean, it's like a tour de force of experience and storytelling. But in the closing remarks of the book, you say, in the opening remarks, you talk of the draft, that this is a draft, right? And in the closing remarks, you say, now that you have read all the early drafts, right? So like, now you've thought you've read the book, right? And to be told it's a draft. Like, I think that's marvelous. And it says, prepare for consequences from friends, lovers, and enemies. Why do you call them drafts after you've seduced us into the story, right?
It's a very good question, Dionne Brand.
I'm a double named.
So my approach to the book was to create a kind of nested object, and to have the main narrative approach be one of a kind of nested telling. And that's because I had this anxiety about not wanting to be too definite.
Well, it's a definite book.
It's but to move
Yeah.
with, I think, a deeper appreciation for speculation. I mean, that's what I mean by not too definite. So, you know, the approaches are on multiple levels. There's this kind of meta kind of storytelling that's happening where all of the stories are kind of self-conscious and they know what's going on in the other stories, even though they're separate things. And so because of that, I wanted to give the impression as though the stories themselves are consciousness. And to have that discomfort, it must produce a kind of discomfort, a kind of strange energy. To have that be one of the ways in which the book finds a certain coherence where otherwise I am refusing the logic, right, of the codes. So it's both that the stories kind of exist apart from each other, but once they all come together in this way, it's hard to take them apart after that. So there's that. And I think when things reoccur in the stories, because they're aware of each other and they're not necessarily following a one-to-one logic, when things from previous stories appear in other stories, they shift. They kind of, they become a kind of metamorphosis in and of themselves. And so I kind of look at the book as 2 or 3 versions of itself. But that's because I have a schematic brain. And that is the way it moves. It just does that. I arrive at those places and I find myself surprised. And I like that surprise. And so I think each of the ways that the book comes together, with the 3 parts, with the stories that sort of speak to each other without actually being, closely related in the book, and to have characters reappear in completely disparate stories, that to me was a kind of drafting. Like, here's one version of this thing, and here's another version of this thing. But if you put everything together, here's another version of it.
Yes.
And so I call these the early drafts. Because maybe I want to go back and do the 59 like you just said. Earth in the time
the other
of
59, right?
The other 50, the shadow 59. Yeah, bring them into the light.
So, I mean, finally, I want to ask you before we open to the audience, which story made you laugh as you were writing it?
There were a few of them.
Yeah.
But I think this story that was originally called The Shooting Squad,
And then,
but is now called Speaking from Jupiter, where which it starts with a tragic kind of story where the protagonist has lost a twin sibling to a kind of self-inflicted gunshot wound, but it was an accident. And they're sitting at the grave of their twin, telling them what they've been up to, and that it's that they've been at this retirement home where they're doing things that they're not supposed to do with the residents, such as trying to teach them how to shoot guns. But is there actually a gun? Stay tuned. So that story really made me laugh. Yeah, that one, and there's one with the monk with the yogurt, making the yogurt and cheeses and stuff. That one was that made me laugh too.
Yeah, I always think that when a piece of work kind of makes you laugh, you've got it. Do you know what I mean? You've got it then because it's outside of someone.
Right.
So that was the penultimate question. Which story caused you the most discomfort but had to be written?
That's a very good question. I felt discomfort with a lot of them. Probably How the River Swells. Might have been that one. Because I had written it in a different, like I said, I was looking for anything, just anything. If there was something in the fridge, I would take it and put it in there because, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to figure it out. But that one I'd written under different circumstances. And I actually had a number of conversations with Lynn, my editor, about whether I should put this one in the book at all. But she kind of insisted that it should be there. But yes, that one. That one was tough.
I imagine.
Yeah.
That one made me kind of sad too. How the river swells. Yeah. Oh, we shouldn't end there, should we?
No, we shouldn't.
Yeah.
We should have another thing.
I should have asked them in the opposite way.
Yes.
I liked The Birth Dealer too.
Oh, yes. That one made me
First of
laugh.
all, I love
too.
your titles. The titles are all quite affecting.
Yeah, that one really made me laugh. Too.
Yeah. Oh, The Blind Seamstress.
Oh, yes.
It's wonderful. Tell about The Blind Seamstress.
Yes. And I mean, this is what I mean by, privileging mystery over a kind of expected narrative clarity, So this is a story about a little girl who has to go for a fitting for her school uniforms, to get her school uniforms made. But what she doesn't know is that she's going to this neighbor of theirs, who is a very good friend of hers. They have wonderful rapport. They have deep history, and this seamstress is, of course, a lot older than her. But then when her mother says, go to Madame Jacques, the whole world turns black for this little girl because Madame Jacques is blind. And so it's only a child who would think, oh my God, I'm going to die. She's going to prick me with a needle and I'll bleed out. And, she's blind. So if my blood is on the floor, she's going to slip on it and she'll die too. And so she's trying to get out of having her uniforms made by Madame Jacques. Because, of course, as little children, as all little children are, certain things are very literal to them. But then she ends up, learning a lot about not just Madame Jacques, but about herself and about the lovely way that children tend to show us about, what the human condition actually is. So it seems like a lot of things are happening naturalistically, almost by accident in the story. But then they all sort of culminate in this really wonderful insight that this little girl has at the end of this story. But there's a lot of laughter in it. Yeah. And so, yes, but I had a really great time writing that story. And it's actually based on somebody that I know. Mm-hmm. A lot of the things that seem really outlandish in the book, I was able to land only because there was a corollary in my life. And so I actually did know a blind woman who used to make clothes when I was a child. But the character is not me, because I never had clothes made by Madame Jacques. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dionne Brand. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You have been listening to Books and Ideas Audio, a presentation of the Vancouver Writers Fest. To hear more events like this one and view our upcoming events, visit our website at writersfest.bc.ca.